Welcome to Different is Good Virtual Summit, brought to you today by the Public Speakers Association. I'm so excited to introduce to you the amazing Mr. Fox Spire. Fox, why don't you take it from here?
Thanks very much, Tanya, and hello, everybody. It's always an honor and a privilege to be on these virtual summits and really try to spread something of value to you all. So last month when I was on, I explained that I am a high school Spanish teacher, and I have been for the past 15 years. And one of the things that I explained within that was that you don't have to feel good in order to make others feel great about themselves. And the example was that oftentimes I feel like a second-rate teacher, but I think as teachers, actually I know this, that our impact goes well beyond what we think it is. We don't think we're making an impact, we surely are. And I sort of began the last virtual summit by explaining how I sort of enter the building every morning. And oftentimes I'm opening the door for a female colleague, and they have all of these bags, 3-4 bags, and they can just walk and talk and just go along normally, and I can't do that. I'm a 40-year-old man with cerebral palsy, and I like to say walking without anything is a conscious act of will. And I'll get into the building, and oftentimes when I get into the school building, customarily, I think of my own high school experience. So I think of my teachers, I think of my coaches, my friends and my classmates, and the things that were said and done to me during that time, some good and some not so good. And I'll look around. And oftentimes I look around, I see students, many of them that were like me, doing something in a way that's acting like someone they're not. And I know that right then, every single day, that I know I'm ordered to teach a certain curriculum, but my main job is to make these students understand that from the moment they were conceived, they were designed to be different. And through the years, I guess my philosophy has changed, but the more it's changed, the more some things have stayed the same. This year, I am in room 401, and room 401 sits behind the cafeteria off of this semi-narrow hallway. And what I mean by semi-narrow is this: the main hallways are about 2 times the size of this semi-narrow hallway. As you go into my room, you go through about 6 to 8 foot passageway that's even narrower than the hallway to get into the main space, which is my classroom. And if you would look around my classroom, you would see that I'm careful about my decorations. They're kind of bland because I'm not an interior decorator. Some of the best stuff in there is my student work throughout the years, which I've been fortunate enough to accrue. But when I began teaching, when I was hired at Whippany Park High School, I knew this. I wasn't an interior decorator, so I had to purchase something that was sturdy, that was of value, and that conveyed a solid message that had to do a lot with the classroom and with life. And I ran into something. There were 7 or 8 posters that I bought that were pretty large and well laminated and sturdy. And they had great imagery on them, and they had a message above them in Spanish that was powerful. So again, as you walk through that semi-narrow passageway into my room, you would see my desk. And behind my desk is a corkboard. And on the corkboard is one of these 8 large, well-laminated posters. And this poster, you'll see a person. And a person's forging a river not on the bike, but holding a bike above their head. They have a helmet on. They're obviously in either a triathlon, Ironman, or working out in the morning. And this river is baked in late afternoon sunlight. And above this picture, this beautiful illustration, is one or two liner in Spanish. And in English, it reads, "Utilize your imagination. There's always another way to get to your destination." Again, it says, utilize your imagination. There's always another way to get to your destination. So, in other words, different can end up being good. And as I look at this, situations in my mind, in my personal life, tend to pop up. And one is this. So from 1997 to 2002, I was lucky enough to attend and graduate from the University of South Carolina. I spent all of that time as part of the baseball team, 3 years as a student manager, 2 years as a student manager, and 3 as a student coach. From 1999 to 2002, I formed a lifelong bond with the then volunteer assistant, Mr. Stuart Lake. And since then, Stuart has been in a bunch of places. So after our World Series appearance in 2002, Stuart was hired at the College of Charleston, and he coached there for a year. He has since been on to the University of Mississippi, the Citadel, Charleston Southern, and he's now back at the University of South Carolina as a paid coach. And all along his journey, all of these years, in the past 15, 17 years, I've gone and visited him and caught up with him each and every year. And in 2004 and 2005, he worked and coached for and at the University of Mississippi. And a number of times, let's say 3 or 4 times during those years, I went over and visited him. So I'd fly into Memphis, Tennessee, he'd come pick me up and he'd drive me that hour into Oxford. Oxford is a beautiful college town. Unbelievable architecture, and they have a place called the Grove, where the speed limit is Archie Manning's uniform number, 18 miles an hour. So he's all over there when you get into Ole Miss and the campus. Well, in 04 and 05, when I visited, I spent a lot of time around the baseball team. They had some phenomenal teams in those years. And I can recall one of the first times I was in the locker room before the game. And you see that players prepare differently and in different ways for a game. In other words, before they prepare, they're preparing to get out in the field and get loose and to warm up. This was after batting practice. So typically what happens is players will stretch, throw, and take batting practice, and then go back in the locker room for about a half an hour, 45 minutes or so, and make some final preparations before they get their full uniform on, go out, stretch and throw again, take infield, and play the game. So I'm looking around the locker room during this period between batting practice and infield practice before the game, and I'm watching how all of the players prepare. And typically you have players who just like to talk. Some are doing some reading. Back in those days, you still had the hardcover books. There were no Kindles or iPads yet. But you did have players listening to music and doing those kinds of things. Okay, and so you had pockets of those people. I noticed one player that was different than the rest. His name was Matt Tolbert, and Matt was a left-handed hitting, right-handed throwing infielder. And he had this spiral notebook, and I'm watching him before the game on this particular day. He's writing with his left hand very deliberately for, 5-10 minutes. He's very deliberate about it. Okay, and I can almost tell he's writing in script. And I thought to myself, what is he doing? And you may think that he was maybe writing some mental notes or adding a little bit to some scouting reports on the opposing team's players or pitchers. And I thought about this, and I didn't say anything to anybody. The next day, I came to find out he was doing this. So he's a right-handed thrower and a right-handed writer as well. And if you Notice I said he's writing with his left hand. I didn't misspeak. So he's writing with his offhand deliberately, okay, in script. And he's just writing stream of consciousness. And you'd ask, why is Matt doing this? Well, his left hand is his glove hand. And he was doing this so that he'd become more dexterous with his left hand, his glove hand, so that hand during games could move more freely toward ground balls, fly balls, pop-ups, and line drives. An interesting way to do things, but he's taking advantage of every single moment he could before a game to prepare and be better at that game. It may have not been the exact reason why, but I don't think it's a coincidence that Matt played a number of years in the major leagues. And while he was a good runner and a good hitter and a good overall player, he didn't have any of those wow measurable skills. Like, didn't have enormous power or enormous speed. He was very good, but I think what made him great was his defense. And I think he played in the major leagues for as long as he did because he was a very good and versatile defensive player. So that's example number one of how someone prepares differently and ends up being good and oftentimes better than the majority of people. That's the story of Matt Tolbert. And a lot of us right now might be speakers. Okay? And I can recall, as you might have heard Tanya and I speaking before this, she said, you've basically, Fox, been on many virtual summits. And to be truthful, I haven't missed many since December of 2015. So December of 2015 was my very first virtual summit. And preparing for this and getting me ready for this, Tanya, in her own way, sort of said, Fox, you're going to be great. And I'm sorry, this is how it works. And she sort of showed me, what to do, how long it would be, where she would suggest keeping a timer. And she also said, listen, don't read off of anything. And because it's not authentic. It doesn't sound conversational. It's not conversational, and therefore it's not engaging. And so from there, I thought, okay, how am I going to sort of script this and then practice the script so that I'm not reading off of anything when it comes time for the virtual summit? And over the years, my preparation has evolved. Oftentimes what works for me is that I'm practicing the presentation when I'm doing something else. So car rides for me have become very effective ways of practicing basically what I'm going to say during the presentation. It works out well. I drive 20 minutes into work. So this is 20 or 25 minutes, so I have that time in the morning, okay? But, we have to prepare as speakers for things to go wrong because they almost always do. Maybe the microphone doesn't work, or it's going in and out, or there are some unmeasured or noises during the presentation, things we didn't plan for, but we have to plan for it to go wrong. And I'm in the middle of reading a great book. It's called TED, from the leader of TED, Chris Anderson. And he sort of gives you guidelines in the book of how to prepare and present a presentation, a speech. And he has a chapter on scripting. It's basically to script or not to script. And if you're going to and memorize it, if it sounds natural, how are you going to do this? And he provides little snippets of advice from former TED speakers. And I was reading a few weeks ago of someone who does this, okay? Keeping in mind that when I prepare, oftentimes it's in my car. Well, this person will practice in the hotel room or in his car in front of the TV and with it on and with the radio on. Okay, but he's not putting anything on mute. What he is doing is he'll practice by doing this with the TV on normal volume and the radio on normal volume. He'll go through his speech, his presentation, okay, and he'll keep his voice above the volume of the TV or the radio, and keep a smile the entire time. Maybe he'll do it in front of the mirror while the TV is on. And if he loses the smile or the volume of his voice goes below that of the TV or the radio, he'll start over. Okay? And then he'll get through that portion. But then he steps it up. And he says that once he masters that part of his preparation, he'll go on to speaking above the volume of the TV or the radio with a smile on his face, and then he'll put himself in he'll do something else, put himself in an awkward position, like he'll start stretching during this portion of his practice. And again, if he loses the smile or the volume of his voice goes below that of the TV or the radio, he'll start over again. And I thought, wow, that's really cool, because if you can get through that, you are prepared for it, for things to go wrong, if in fact they do during your presentation. So again, there's some stories of people doing things differently in order to make themselves good or possibly better than the rest, kind of getting that mental edge from the athletic field to the stage. Now, to go on to a third piece of advice. I grew up in the 1980s. In the 1980s, we had heavy metal music and hair bands, and this man was part of it. But he played the heavy metal music. His name is Dave Mustaine, and Dave spent a little bit of time in the band Metallica, and then moved on, and he's I think still with the band Megadeth, traveling the world and playing heavy metal music. Now, he's an artist. He's an entertainer. He's a musician. He has musical talent that I can barely relate to. But I can relate to this. What the things that you have to do to get back on track. So in some of my research and knowing a little bit about his story, some time ago, keeping in mind that Dave is an unbelievable guitar player, he suffered an injury or he became ill. And because of this, he lost a lot of the fine motor skills in his hands and fingers. And we know, even if we don't play the guitar, your hands and fingers are essential. And he plays very particular notes on the guitar. And so he had to, music is his life. It's his livelihood. It's totally part of him. So he had to find a way to get back on track, to regain the motor skills in his hands and fingers so he could get back on tour, get back to making records, and get back to doing what he loves. And I'll put it this way. This story really shows you that we can develop skills that we don't have talent for or we've lost talent for. Neuroscience tells us that. And I think this story will tell us that. What Dave did is he struggled to find ways to get him back to his old self. But he got with a therapist, a doctor, who had him do this. He would take tiny little needles, okay? And he would practice this hundreds of thousands of times a day. He would take these tiny little needles, pinch them ever so slightly, okay? And put them in these little tiny holes, hundreds of holes. And he'd practice again and again and again so that he could regain a very fine motor skill. And by doing that, which is it's hard for me to explain, but by doing that, he was able to get that guitar pick back in his hand and get back to being himself on the guitar. So, in other words, become strong at one of your weakest points, I think is the story of Dave Mustaine, and finding something that was different that got him not only good, not only amazing, but in this case, back on track. So there you have it, some advice that I've, I guess, accrued over the years of people doing things differently that can make you better on the athletic field, on the speaking stage, and on the musical stage. So the stories of Dave Mustaine, Matt Tolbert, and then some speaking advice that I've accrued over the years. So I'll put it like this. In days of yore, it was such a fuss. I could not find it within myself to adjust. Tried as I must, I could not adjust. Stuck in my routine, rigid even in my dreams, my life defined by structure, one misstep away from destruction. Never giving in to the spontaneous or anything that might be extraneous. Must make myself into a man and pull myself out of this routine quicksand. In days of yore, it was such a fuss. I could not in myself to adjust, but tried as I must, I could not adjust. So I hope these stories help you make the adjustment and do things a little bit differently so you can get to where you want to go. I think it's certainly true that if we continue to be persistent and do what we've always done and we don't get the results, we're always going to get what we don't want. So step out, get out of your comfort zone a little bit, and do something a little bit differently. And it's sure to yield different and better results. So again, my name is Fox Beyer. I'm a teacher, author, poet, and speaker. I do have a book out called Letter Kindling, Igniting, Inspiring, Evoking the Fire Within. And it's a compilation of poems. A lot are motivational and inspirational. And if you've been listening and you like what you hear, I want to make this offer to you. You can log on to my website. It is foxbeyer.com, FOXBEYER.com, again, fox like the animal. And then log on to there and shoot me a message. If you do that, if you're interested in the book, I would be happy to send you one for free. Again, it's called Letter Kindling, Igniting, Inspiring, and Evoking the Fire Within. And the poem Adjust that you just heard is from that book itself. And I will end with another one. It's called Step. Step, you're idle no more. Step, pick yourselves up off the floor. Step, get up out of your seats. Step, you will not lie there in defeat. Step, in mind and in body a winning tranquility. Step, without movement there is no possibility. Step, each pace equals a seed. Step, in the world's largest sequoia tree. Step, one by one they will amass. Step, core-filled passes down victory path. Step out, be different, prepare differently than you ever have before, and it's sure to yield different, good, and better results. Thank you. Thank you, Tanya. And Tanya, back to you.